It's fair to say last week's deep dive was a little chaotic at times, but I'm back and I have a plan. I have elbow pads on, so I'm taking this seriously. And welcome along to this week's deep dive. Yes, I'm Alex Burkill, presenter, meteorologist, and as always, I'm coming to you from our headquarters here in Exeter. And as always, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, share this with anyone who you think might be interested in, and leave some comments, leave some questions, because I will be looking at them later on. And if I don't answer them in the comments, we'll be looking at them in the Weather Studio Live when Aidan will be joining me on Friday. But let's get going. If you did watch last week's deep dive, along with all the calamity, you will have heard me talking about Tropical Storm Dexter and the potential for it to influence the weather across the UK. I also suggested that I'd take a look back, and I like to come through on my promises, so let's do that. Let's look at the satellite imagery, which is what I have behind me, from the last 5 days or so. If I just run it through, so this is Thursday, and you can see the low that is Tropical Storm Dexter, or it was Tropical Storm Dexter by this point. It had gone through extratropical transition as it heads towards the UK. Now, I talked about the potential for this feature to influence our weather, particularly through the latter part of the weekend just gone. Did that happen? Well, yes and no. Now, the forecast track on Tuesday had for Tropical Storm Dexter to come this way. It wasn't going to be a tropical storm by this point, as I mentioned, but it was going to come just to the northwest of the UK, a bit further away from us than Flores was, not as deep, and so not expected to bring particularly hazardous weather at all, but just a spell of wet weather. By Wednesday, the story changed a little bit. If you saw the 10-day trend, you would have seen a slightly different story, and this is kind of what happened, in as much as actually, if I put the radar on, what you'll see is we went through Sunday, there is some wetter weather that pushed into parts of the northwest, but here's the low that is the remnants of Dexter, and a separate feature kind of formed from Dexter, and that it was this that brought the rain that pushed into parts of the northwest as we went through Sunday and into Monday as well. The low that is Dexter is actually still around at the moment. And if we just run through the beginning part of the week, and it's somewhere around here-ish, you can just about see that swirl of cloud. And this is important because if I put up our pressure pattern, and you can see it's not particularly deep low, it's quite a shallow feature because it's pushed a little bit further south. But nonetheless, it is influencing our weather because of the wind direction. I've got the jet stream on, you can see it kind of buckling a bit. But if I put our surface winds on instead, and the winds are going around the low, and so then we're dragging in some air from the south, as well as the other patterns going on. We're dragging some hot air in from the east as well, but it's from the south in particular where we have some pretty high temperatures coming in. So some hot air that's making its way in, and it's this that is causing the fact that we have a heat wave at the moment. You'll have no doubt heard we have some pretty high temperatures across the UK. I'll come on to our temperatures in a second. But why are we having a heat wave? Well, partly because of Dexter, partly because of where the air is coming from, and partly because we're generally under the influence of high pressure for the time being, and with that high pressure, lots of settled weather, and where we get the settled weather, that's going to bring some pretty decent warmth. The sun's still very strong at this time of year, and so we're going to see day-on-day heat rising, though exactly where we see the highest temperatures, that will fluctuate. I'll come on to that in a second, like I said. But whilst we're here looking at this chart, I want to highlight the exceptional heat across other parts of Europe at the moment. So over North Africa, we've had a heat wave through the last week or so, really, and that hot air, as expected, has now pushed its way in across parts of Spain, Portugal, and even into France. Now, across Spain, yesterday, the highest temperature was 43.8 Celsius, and there's a reasonable chance that today it's going to get into the mid-40s, so 45 Celsius. Portugal got to 42.8 yesterday, and in France it got to 42.4. So very hot. Not as hot here in the UK, but nonetheless we are in a heat wave and we're going to see some pretty high temperatures. So let's talk about those now then. If I remember what chart I want to get up, I think it's this one. It wasn't. Or this one maybe. I've forgotten which button I need to press. So that's awkward. But here we go. So here are our anomaly charts compared to average for the next couple of days. And a couple of things you can see across pretty much the whole of the country. temperatures are well above average at the moment. Less so across parts of Scotland. The far north of Scotland are very close to average. Some parts of towards like Lincolnshire, Yorkshire are close to average as well, but most places are pretty high. It's actually across parts of the Midlands and southern England that we're seeing the highest temperatures today. They're already in the low 30s, so pretty hot, but nonetheless it's very warm everywhere. Then, like I said, exactly where we see the highest temperatures changes a little bit through the next few days. By Wednesday we'll start to see something a bit fresher, more comfortable across some southern western parts, a bit more cloud pushing in. Meanwhile, across eastern parts it's probably going to be even hotter tomorrow than it was today. We're absolute highs across the country, maybe ever so slightly down, but we're still looking at 33, 34 Celsius perhaps. And then by Thursday, a bit fresher, cooler perhaps for many places down the eastern side. Still pretty warm, or still pretty hot, to be honest. High 20s, we may just about scrape into the low 30s, around a 50% chance, I'd say, on Thursday of somewhere getting to 30 Celsius. And then we see the heat building again as we go into Friday, particularly across parts of the south, southwest. And so temperatures more likely to be in the low 30s across some parts as we go into Friday. So some very hot weather still to come through this period. Just a brief reminder of our heatwave threshold map, and you can see where temperatures need to exceed certain temperatures in order to be a heat wave. Remember, for it to be a heat wave, we need 3 consecutive days of the place exceeding its threshold. For around London and other southeastern parts, many places are 28, highlighted by the deep red. The bright red highlighting where the threshold is 27, the deep pink 26, and then the rest of the country, Devon, Cornwall, much of Wales and much of northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, the threshold is 25. Lots of places are exceeding those thresholds at the moment. We've already had a few days where we've seen temperatures exceed it. Like I said, today we've already got temperatures in excess of 30 at time of recording, and they're going to get even warmer through the next few hours. And yesterday we had temperatures in the low 30s as well. So we are in a heat wave, and it's going to go on for a little while yet. It's going to be a relatively prolonged one. It's heat wave 4.0, if you will, because we have had 4 heat waves now this year. I'll come on to a bit how unusual that is in a second, but let's get back to the weather across the UK through the next few days. And because, as we often see with some very warm, humid air that we have at the moment, as we often see with the heat, there is the risk of some significant thunderstorms developing. Now, as we go through tonight, like I said, there's a bit of cloud coming in across parts of the southwest, and that could bring a few spots of rain. There are also some showers tomorrow across parts of Scotland in particular, and there's the potential that some of these showers could get a bit heavier as we go through later tomorrow, more so overnight tomorrow and into Thursday. There's the potential for some hefty, maybe thundery downpours, even a few showers dotted around elsewhere, but it's particularly across Scotland where we have the risk of some thundery downpours as we go through Wednesday night into Thursday. So watch out for that, because we may need to issue a warning for those if we get good confidence on where we're most likely to see those hefty showers. Otherwise, Thursday is a bit showery in quite a few places, but it's really across Scotland where we have the greatest risk. Look at those rainfall rates. They're pretty intense. Now, at this lead time, what are we talking? 48 hours ahead? You can't be that precise with the position of thundery downpours this far ahead. It's very difficult by their very nature. Showers, they're hit and miss, they're scattered, they're difficult to pinpoint. And so we need to take this not with a pinch of salt, a bit more than that, maybe a spoonful of salt perhaps, but we need to just be aware that there is the potential for some heavy thundery downpours to develop across parts of Scotland in particular as we go through through Thursday in particular. So just to recap, and if I look ahead to this coming Wednesday, this is our 3-hour rainfall totals, and if we just look at Scotland, because that's where we're likely to see the greatest rainfall rates, and you can see it's highlighting one shower just over that part of northwest Scotland, which could be pretty intense. I think if I look at it, it's talking more than 50 millimetres in 3 hours. Now that's a pretty heavy downpour that we could get, because I mean they're saying 3 hours, but a lot of that could come in just an hour or so. That's enough to cause some significant impacts. But the position of this, I wouldn't take that literally at this stage. It could be pretty much anywhere within the zone, and whether or not we see those heavy rainfall rates still to be determined, and we could still see some hefty showers as we go through Wednesday night into Thursday. And then for Thursday, I just need to skip to our extended model because that gives a better guide for what we can expect through Thursday, I'd say. And let's go back here, and it's again highlighting some pretty high rainfall rates. Actually, I'm going to look back at just this one and see if it covers. Oh, it does cover, yeah. You can see as we go through Thursday morning even, some really heavy, perhaps thundery downpours developing. This is suggesting across northern parts of Scotland, but not necessarily. It could be a bit further south across some central areas. And so watch out for that. We don't have any warnings at the moment. The thunderstorm warnings are notoriously difficult at long lead times. You'd have to give such a broad area of where the risk of thunder and intense downpours exists that it wouldn't be particularly useful. So we'll wait a little bit longer. Maybe tomorrow we might issue one more. So, possibly tomorrow we might need to look at issuing a thunderstorm warning for parts of Scotland, either Wednesday night into Thursday or perhaps more likely on Thursday, when we can firm up a little bit more on the detail, particularly exactly where is most likely to see those heavy thundery downpours. Otherwise, in other places, seeing some showers at times really as we go through Thursday, but they're not as intense as the ones I'm expecting across parts of Scotland, and they're pretty hit and miss. Most places having a lot of fine sunny weather. And like I've already gone through, temperatures, in the east on Wednesday, they're pretty high or very high, and then slightly lower by Thursday. But then on Friday, well, Friday looks like a fine day for the majority of the country. A few showers across Scotland, but not as intense as the showers that we're going to see on Thursday. And a good deal of sunshine, particularly across England and Wales. And that's why we're seeing the temperatures rising a bit. There's the potential for some showery bursts to push into the southwest as we go through into this Saturday, and a bit more cloud down the eastern side of the country, perhaps, and that could bring some drizzly rain, but on the whole it's looking largely fine and still pretty hot, and it's a similar-ish story as we go into Sunday as well. So lots of fine weather to come, lots of hot weather still, temperatures most days somewhere likely to be in the low 30s, and so the heat wave continues for a little while yet. For more information about what we can expect looking further ahead, well, check out the 10-day trend. Honor will be bringing that to you tomorrow. Or you can check out the 14-day outlook, which I'll be putting on our app later on. Oh, actually, whilst we're on that topic, looking a little bit further ahead, I do have a HOV-Moller chart. So this is showing what's going on with our upper air pattern. Here's the UK marked by this cross, and this is currently the UK. And then we're looking further into the future as we go down and going west and east from left to right. And what you can see is the orange is indicating high pressure, generally the dominant story at the moment. It does drift a little bit towards the east through the next couple of days before returning again as we go towards kind of the weekend and beginning part of next week, before I think as we go through next week, early signs are that we're going to see the high pressure that's bringing lots of settled weather gradually pushing a bit further north, and that could allow for some hefty showers to come up across southern parts, but the progress of that high pressure drifting northwards still a bit uncertain, and if it does push, it could clear quite far north, and then later next week we end up in a bit more of a mobile pattern. But I think at this stage it's pretty equal likelihood as to whether the high keeps around or whether or not we change that more mobile, changeable pattern. That is possible. So one to watch, one to pay attention to. So what else do I want to talk about? Okay, let's look back at summer so far. So I've already mentioned in last week's deep dive that we are pretty much, if we look at mean temperatures so far this summer, we're on course to be, for it to be the warmest summer on record. We're not quite there at the moment, and obviously we have what? Where are we now? The 12th? Just under 3 weeks left of summer to go, so still a lot could change. But based on where we're at currently this summer, and based on the fact that we have more hot weather to come through the next few days, and whilst it probably won't be as hot next week as it is currently, it's still looking, if anything, around or a little bit above average temperature-wise, so no real cooler spell as such, and so likelihood is that it is going to end up as being the warmest summer on record. But I just wanted to delve into that a little bit more in detail because, as I said, this is heatwave 4 of the year that we're currently in, and that's kind of unusual. It's definitely not unheard of, but it's a bit unusual for us to reach these heatwave thresholds for individual times. And I wanted to break it down a little bit. So there are a few things to unpack here. So yes, we have had a fair few hot spells this year. We've had 13, or including today, 14 days so far this year where temperatures have exceeded 30 Celsius sometime this year. And to compare that, well, last year we only had 10, so we've already had a fair few more. And tomorrow, the next few days, likely to get above 30 Celsius, so we're going to get a few more. So quite a high number compared to last year. But if you look back at 1995, well, in that year we had 34 days with temperatures peaking above 30 Celsius somewhere in the UK. So we're nowhere near that number. But interestingly, the graph that I have behind me illustrates our mean temperature each day compared to the average for that day based on data going back decades. And what you can see is, yes, we've had some hot spells, our heat waves. You can see them with our peaks. They're the 3 previous ones earlier on this summer. And in between the heat waves, it's not been as hot, obviously, but it's never really been especially cool, in as much as, yes, June started off a fair bit cooler than average, and then we have had the odd cooler spell, but really we're only talking 1, maybe 2 days of temperatures below average, and they're only a degree or so below average. Meanwhile, the majority of the season has either been hot in a heat wave, or it's been a fair few degrees above average, or at least the warmer side of average, which is why when we look at the season as a whole at the end of the season, it's very likely to come up being the hottest on record, because of the fact that just our warmth or our temperatures have just generally been above average, which makes perfect sense when I say it out loud. Let's break it down a bit further. Why is this happening? Well, if you think back to spring, when it was exceptionally dry, and so then the ground didn't have that moisture embedded within it, and so it took less energy to heat up, and so it took less for us to get some pretty high temperatures. And then once you've had one heat wave, I mean, weather is variable, it's changeable, and so that doesn't necessarily increase the likelihood of getting another weather setup that allows for more hot weather. But what it does mean is when you get that hot weather, it's more likely to be more intense because the ground is dry, there's that underlying base heat within the land, and so it will take less for those temperatures to get so high, so uncomfortably high from many people's point of view. But also worth bearing in mind, yes, we've had 4 hot spells, temperatures today again back into the mid-30s, but the highest temperature we've only recorded so far this year is 35.8. Now that's higher than we've had in the last couple of years. I mean, last year's highest temperature was 34.8, so it's a degree higher than that, and it was 33 point something the year before. But obviously in 2022, we recorded 40 Celsius, and we're nowhere near that hot. And also in 2019, we had 38.7, so rounded 39 Celsius. We're not as hot as that. So we have had 4 heat waves already. And but they haven't been record-breakingly hot in terms of the absolute maximum temperatures that we've had. They're several degrees away from that. But it's just the fact through this season, just the general trend, it's always been pretty warm. And even if we've had some cooler days, they've been only slightly cooler than average and pretty short-lived, any cooler spells as well. So I just wanted to highlight that because I found it pretty interesting. Talking of warmth and heat, it is having a knock-on effect to our sea surface temperatures. Now, we're all aware that our climate is changing. Our climate is getting warmer, and we're seeing that with our sea surface temperatures as well. This graph, using Met Office data but plotted by the BBC, so thank you to them for letting us use it, shows us the sea surface temperatures around the UK for the first 7 months of the year since 1980. And you can see, as we often see with a lot of our output, an upward trend, and so temperatures are getting warmer. In fact, for the first 7 months of the year so far, the temperatures are around 0.2 degrees higher than the records, like I say, dating back to 1980. And the fact that we're seeing this warming trend is having a knock-on effect on many things. It's also self-fulfilling in as much as a warmer sea holds less carbon, and so then that's going to lead to increasing amounts of climate change because carbon is a big problem. And then also A warmer sea then leads to less likely to see your cool sea breezes developing, which then means when we get any hot spells, they're likely to be even hotter. And so the knock-on effect, it keeps feeding itself. And so then we're likely to see things getting more extreme. We're likely to see this trend going up. Now, you may say, oh, that's lovely. I can go for a swim in the sea and it's not going to be too cool. And whilst that is true, it is going to be warmer than it would have been previously. There are some major negative impacts. I mean, I've already mentioned the ones of the knock-on effect on climate change as well, but there's also the effect that it's having on marine life. Cod, for example, having to migrate further north to get to the colder seas there because it likes a colder sea than we're now currently able to give it around some parts of the UK. And so we're seeing cod numbers decreasing. Other species are also having to move away. But we are also seeing an increase in some other species, certain type of jellyfish, octopuses, it's octopuses. Some octopuses are becoming more common around the British seas as well, and also bluefin tuna. So we're seeing the species around the UK in the sea changing because of this rise in sea surface temperatures that we're seeing through the last decades when we look back at this chart. So that's another thing. And then another thing to cover is the fact that it is the Perseid meteor shower at the moment. Now, this meteor shower happens every year around this time of the year, and it's already been going since, I think, late July, and it's the peak will be through tonight into tomorrow morning. So the greatest chance of seeing it will be through the early hours of tomorrow morning, from around 11 o'clock tonight all the way until dawn tomorrow. And so how's the weather looking? Well, I've already darted over it quite quickly, but let's just recap what the weather's doing through the early hours of tomorrow. And actually for much of the country, yes, there are a few showers across parts of Scotland, but for much of us it's looking dry, and there's a lot of clear skies around, the exception being across parts of the far southwest of Wales, southwest England, also along the south coast of England, and perhaps some murkiness around some North Sea coastal parts as well. But the majority of places will have often clear skies, so pretty good viewing for the Perseid meteor shower. That being said, worth bearing in mind, we had a full moon only a few days ago, and so the brightness from that is going to make it a little bit harder to see, but it's the Perseid meteor shower. It's usually the most dramatic of the year. This year we're looking at around 100 meteors per hour. Now, other years can be more active. There's already some anticipation ahead of the 2028 meteor shower, which could be a meteor storm, so we could even have more meteors than that. We're talking 150, 200 meteors per hour. Not quite that high amount at the moment, but nonetheless, 100 or so meteors likely to be spotted per hour. And why does it happen? Well, it's because the Earth is travelling through, moves through the tail of the comet that is Swift-Tuttle, and it's as it moves through, then the little bits, the meteoroids, if you will, they pass through the atmosphere and then they burn up. So the meteoroids, they're only small. We're talking about the size of a grain of sand, but they're moving incredibly fast. We're talking, I think it's around 133,000 miles per hour. So incredibly fast. And then they reach the atmosphere, then they burn up, and then you get your meteor because they reach temperatures of around 1600 Celsius, so really hot, and then they burn up. As I mentioned, they're usually only about the size of a grain of sand, so pretty small, so don't usually meet or reach the ground, but if they do, that's when you get your meteorite, but pretty unlikely. So head out to somewhere dark. Hopefully you've got clear skies. Here in the southwest it's not looking so promising, so I may not attempt it, but head somewhere dark, let your eyes adjust to the darkness, look up at the sky, and then look out for it. Try and avoid the moon, but what you can also keep an eye out for are two very bright stars. Well, they won't be stars, they're going to be Jupiter and Venus. So they're very bright in the sky at the moment, and they're also super close. They're only going to be around a degree apart in the sky, so very close. So whilst you're looking up for the meteor shower, also have a look up for Jupiter and Venus. Whilst we're on the topic of space, tomorrow a new weather satellite is being launched, and to find out more about it I'm joined by Tom Blackmore, Manager of Space Data Products and Systems. Tom, thank you so much for joining me on this week's Deep Dive. Why are we launching a new weather satellite? We already have lots giving us really important information, but what's important about this new one?
This new satellite is the first of a series of 6 satellites, which is a next-generation polar orbiting system, and it's being launched by EUMETSAT and ESA. And this is going to be providing us with measurements of our atmosphere going forwards into the 2040s, continuing on.
So like 20 odd years?
Yes, yeah, over 20 years of measurements from these satellites.
And why do we need a new satellite when we already have existing ones?
The existing European polar orbiter satellites are reaching the end of their lives and gradually being retired. So we need to continue the measurements from space, which are absolutely vital for our forecasts. So we need these new satellites to continue to provide the observations well into the future.
And you say the old one's being retired. What happens to it then? Does it continue floating around in the sky?
They retain enough fuel in the satellite to be able to gradually deorbit it. So they boost it a little way towards the Earth's atmosphere, and the orbit will gradually decline over a period of about 20 years or so. And then it will eventually burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. So that means it won't stay in orbit with the potential of breaking up and contributing to space debris.
So, but it's going to take around 20 years for it to come towards the atmosphere and break up, is that right?
Yeah, the first generation series of these weren't originally designed with this in mind. So we've become more and more aware of the problem of space debris over recent years. So it's now good practice to be able to get your satellite out of its active orbit and burn it up in the atmosphere if possible. The new generation have been designed with this in mind. So these are going to be the first European satellites to have active deorbiting and have a controlled re-entry. So they've got a lot more fuel dedicated to pushing the satellite back into the Earth's atmosphere. So that can be done much more quickly than 20 years. And it will mean the satellites moved out of any risk of breaking up and harming any other satellites much more quickly.
I suppose that's the problem if we leave them orbiting around is, they could break up and then bits of debris hit something else more important at that point.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then that causes lots of problems. So it's really interesting that we've now learnt that and thought about it and come up with a solution that's even better than the current one. Now, here's a picture of the satellite that's being launched tomorrow. And tell me the different bits of it. What kind of information is it going to be giving us?
We've got 6 instruments on board this satellite, and they're all labelled on here. I'll go through a few of them maybe a bit more in a minute. First of all, to point out, the main satellite body here is kind of housing all the instruments and has a main rocket engine on it which propels the satellite into space. There's also small thrusters on that satellite body for maintaining the positioning of the satellite and maintaining it in orbit.
So when it's orbiting, it will get adjusted a little bit to make sure it's going round in the correct place.
Going around and pointing in the right direction and making sure all the instruments are pointing down where they need to be, and to make sure it maintains in its correct orbit. So it's orbiting about 800 kilometres above the Earth's surface, or will be once it's in orbit. Circling the Earth, the orbit's about 100 minutes in duration, and
that's really quick, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really quick. And as it orbits, the Earth will spin underneath it. So over the course of a day, it will it will be able to take measurements over the entire surface of the planet.
Wow. What other bits what are the other bits of the satellite then?
We've got some solar panels which provide some energy as well as the propellant on board to the satellite. So provide some electrical energy which helps run the instruments. And then we've got the 6 instruments. So there's quite a number, too many to go through all of them, but the majority of them are what are known as sounding instruments. So they take measurements of the atmosphere at lots of different levels, so they can provide a kind of a profile of what's going on in our atmosphere, which we need for our forecasting models.
And some of these bits were built in the UK, that's right?
Yes, the microwave sounder instrument here, MWS, that was built by Airbus in the UK. Some of the components of the infrared sounder, Yazi NG, were built by UK industry, and the propulsion system for the entire satellite was also built by Airbus UK.
But it's not being launched in the UK, that's right? It's here's an image of it being assembled, ready for launch, is that right?
Yeah, this is the satellite, as you can see here, with the kind of gold foil on the outside of it, with the solar panels all folded up to make sure it can fit into the nose of the rocket. So what we can see here is the encapsulation. So the 2 sides of the rocket enclose over the satellite, sealing it up from any outside influence until it's safely into space.
Oh, I see. So these are the two halves of a rocket, and inside it we're protecting and launching the satellite, and it closes up a bit like an Easter egg,
Yep.
with a very special treat inside.
Yep.
I see, and it looks huge. You can see by the size of the people next to it. And where's this launch happening?
The launch is happening in French Guiana, and so in South America. This is where we have a European launch facility, and this is only going to be the third launch of this particular series of European rockets called Ariane 6. This is the nose cone of the rocket here with the satellite, and that will be put on top of the rest of the launcher, which will take the satellite safely into space.
And it's being launched in the early hours of tomorrow morning, is that right?
Yes, unless there's any kind of adverse weather conditions or anything that prevents the launch or any technical issues, it should be launched tomorrow morning.
Great. And finally, before I let you go, just how much work has it taken for you, for I'm assuming a huge team of people, how much work has it taken for us to get to the stage where this new satellite can launch?
We've been involved in the planning stages of this satellite for decades. Our colleagues in International have been involved in all the agreements to get funding for the satellites, and then we've had various people in the science development teams who have helped to shape what the satellite will look like and what the vital measurements that we need to have. So yeah, it's a long process, but these satellites will continue to provide data for us, hopefully well into the 2040s, and potentially even longer. These satellites have a nominal lifetime of about 7.5 years, but we find in practice that they last a lot longer than that because they are such well-calibrated, well-designed instruments, and they just means that we can get information from them and get the most value for money from them.
And I suppose the environment up in space is pretty clean, in as much as there's less to interfere with it and cause problems unless we get a random piece of debris coming through, like you mentioned. So they're pretty secure. It was really exciting. And so just to reiterate, it is new technology. It's new. It's going to give us even better information than we're already getting. But I guess the biggest reason that we're launching it is because the current satellites, they're coming to the end of their lifespan, so we need to replace them.
Absolutely, yeah. The instruments on board are all brand new. Some of them have heritage with the instruments on the first generation, and are going to provide that continuity of those measurement types. But there's, as I said, 6 instruments on this A satellite. There's actually going to be a second satellite launched in 2026, a B satellite, with another 4 instruments on board, because they just couldn't fit all the instruments onto one satellite.
So different 4 instruments?
Yeah, different 4 instruments. So then we've got this set of 10 instruments providing all these different measurements, lots of different information about our atmosphere. And we know from the previous generation that these are vital for our numerical weather prediction models. They provide 25% of the impact of all observations that we use, just from these European METOP satellites. So
just this group of satellites alone provides a quarter of the observation data that feeds into our models.
A quarter of the impact in our models, yeah.
I see. We're taking into account all the land observations, etc. that we have.
Aircraft and land and all the other satellites that we use in our models.
So they are really invaluable.
They're the single most invaluable source of observations that we have based on our impact studies that we've done.
Amazing. Thank you so much for explaining that to me, Tom. It's been really interesting talking to you.
Thank you.
Well, what a deep dive. Hopefully it was slightly less chaotic than last week's. Let me know in the comments. Also, any questions that you have for me or questions that you have for Tom, I can pass them on and I'll try and get the answers. If we don't answer them in the comments today, we can maybe look at them in the Weather Studio Live on Friday. It will be Aidan and me back on Friday. It's Honor tomorrow, covering the 10-day trend. Remember, if you're watching this on YouTube, you could also be watching this on Spotify or even on our app. Lots of places where you can catch all of our content, so do check that out. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the share button. As always, that would do me a big favour. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again soon.